Yo, y'all, this was Happy 7, and today I'm gonna keep playing the Mystery Files of Detective Inaba number 2. Last time, we broke down the store with a chainsaw, and this dude got killed. So, and now we're gonna go question the butler because, Shizimu? I don't remember her name. Probably says somewhere here. Shimizu, yep. She said that the butler was the killer. So, the first floor hallway, is that Shimi in here? No. Oh, I guess so. Hello. Mr. Ishihara, could I have another moment of your time? You certainly may. How may I help you, sir? On the night of the 10th, Miss Shimizu witnessed you entering Mr. Natsume's room. May I ask what was your business with him? Is there something you're hiding from us? Surely one of you must have discussed who was the person responsible for murdering Mr. Sakaki. Someone must have said, yes, it has to be Mr. Sakura who killed their own father in cold blood. She did it to secure her inheritance, or something of that effect. How dare you! Miss Sakura would never harm her father. If you're going to slander her, I have nothing to further discuss with you. I most sincerely apologize, sir, ma'am. I don't know what came over me. No, it was I who spoke out of turn. I will tell you what happened. I will tell you why Mr. Natsume and I were having a secret meeting on the night of the 10th. Are you really okay with telling us this? Yes, ma'am. Somehow I believe Mr. Inaba has already figured out what I am about to say, regardless. On the evening of that day, Mr. Natsume asked me to come by his room later that night. So is Mr. Natsume, who approached you. Yes, ma'am. As requested, I came by Mr. Natsume's room. He wanted to discuss any methods he could take to seize the inheritance from Miss Sakura. What a greedy bastard. Naturally, I tried to dissuade him from that course of thought. However, it was to no avail. At last, Mr. Natsume came up with the most heinous method. He proposed killing Mr. Sakura, didn't he? Yes, you have it exactly correct, sir. No way. I knew Mr. Natsume couldn't be serious about actually following through with his plan, but I couldn't take that chance. Nevertheless, I felt it was necessary to propose an alternative to his boorish plan. The death threat was sent to Miss Sakura. That was your proposition, wasn't it? You truly are a great detective, sir. And that was a good idea. I imagine that Mr. Natsume agreed to it immediately. He was thinking that if the weak-willed Miss Sakura were to be forced into a corner, that she would naturally give her right to the inheritance. Sadly, I cannot confirm what Mr. Natsume was thinking at the time. After he agreed to my suggestion, we did not speak any further. Then it was the both of you who sent the death threat to Miss Sakura? No, it'd be more accurate to say it was solely me, ma'am. I drafted the threat myself and delivered it to Miss Sakura. Everything was my responsibility. Mr. Natsume was simply a disturbed individual that couldn't be left to his own devices. You did everything that you could to protect us, to protect Miss Sakura. I will turn myself in to the police once the snowstorm is over. For now, would you mind keeping this a secret in order to prevent too much chaos, sir? I understand. I sincerely apologize for not confessing to my actions earlier. No, thank you for telling me all this. Now we have to resume our investigation, so we must get going. Of course, sir. The more we learn, the more confused I get on the situation surrounding Mr. Natsume's murder. If anything, it seems more like Mr. Natsume was the perpetrator than the victim. You're not wrong. He has made many threatening remarks on top of being confrontational. It's no wonder he easily made some enemies under this roof. What could the killer gain from killing Mr. Natsume? Could it still be related to the inheritance? Still, I can't deny how strange it is for him to end up being the one murdered. Other than the fact that they were both killed, there is little similarities between Natsume and Mr. Sakaki's cases. The aim of killing Natsume couldn't be related to the inheritance, which makes this string of murders all the stranger. Unless the aim for killing Mr. Sakaki also wasn't tied into the inheritance. Could it be that all this talk of inheritance is ultimately a cover-up for the real reason behind the premeditated murders? However, it's hard to believe that the inheritance doesn't play a role in this at all. Huh? Why do you say that? It's a holographic will we found. It was dated 3 days ago, and we know Mr. Sakaki had lost the use of his hands, so he couldn't have written it himself. This means that the amanuensis is unquestionably involved, but how much of the will was approved by Mr. Sakaki and how much of it was their own doing? I get you. If the agent is indeed Miss Sakura, then we've already solved the case. But on the other hand, if it wasn't Miss Sakura, then it becomes a question of who would want her to inherit everything and why. Precisely. If you think about it carefully, the common thread between the two murders is that they both involve Sakura in some fashion. However, Sakura has an alibi for when Natsume was killed. Yeah, Azusa, Aoi, and I were playing cards with her. Indeed, if it were to count everyone who had solid alibis on the night of the 10th, we have you, Azusa, Aoi, Sakura, and Inspector Harima. That makes 5 people. Furthermore, Sasamoto and Ishihara met early this morning and are able to provide an alibi for each other, which brings our total to 7 thus far. And if we count you and Dr. Harima, who spent the night at your guest room, we have 9 people. So it would seem. I think we've put together all we can for now. Huh? Are you sure, Mr. Inaba? I am positive. Wait, what? Now then, everyone, how is the deduction going? The truth is, you now have access to all the information and evidence this case has to offer. Who is the killer, and how did they do it, and what was their motive? Detective Sogo Inaba stands ready to unveil the case. If you feel you have gathered all the evidence you can, then go and solve the mystery with skill and pizzazz. Oh, wow. Oh, you need more time to look over your evidence and notes? My mistake. Once you feel that you've pieced together the case, please speak to your amazing assistant, Nina Arimura. It is then she will let the curtain rise on the final act. I look forward to seeing a grand display of your reasoning skills. Though I believe I've found all that I can, it wouldn't hurt to hear their alibis and testimonies once more. That's right. Let's ask around one more time. Put together the case. Ah, jeez. I'm so bad at this. Okay. All right. I'm going to talk to everybody, then we'll look over the notes, have a little bit of a discussion, and see if I can figure it out. Right, yeah, that's all the same. So, if everybody's just going to repeat what they said earlier, then I don't see a whole lot of reason to talk to people anymore. Nope, okay. And I doubt I'll find any more clues, so let's do it, I guess. Hopefully this doesn't go as poorly as it did last time. Okay. Mr. Inaba, are you ready to put together the case? Yes. Arimura, would you mind gathering everyone into the dining room? Mr. Inaba, does this mean? Yes, I'm ready to put together the case. I'm not, but we'll see. Thank you, everyone, for coming. So, were you able to piece together the entire case, Mr. Inaba? Yes, ma'am. Then please let us hear your deduction. Of course, ma'am. Let us look back at what's happened. Allow me to first explain Mr. Natsume's case. Our second victim was Natsume Sakaki. He was killed in his own room, and his body was discovered wearing a raincoat inside out. The time of death was around 2:10 a.m. The killer had stabbed Mr. Natsume 5 times in the chest and slit his throat open. Even though, in the picture there, his throat looks perfectly intact. The carpet was soaked with a large amount of blood, and the blood was even splattered all the way to the bookshelf. As for the murder weapon, it was a knife taken from the kitchen. To speak on the state of this room further, there was no chance of an outside third party that could have conducted the killing. To speak plainly, the killer is one of us. That can't be. Mr. Inaba, if I may interject, the killer would likely have blood splattered on them during the act, but the only traces of blood we found was on the raincoat of the victim was wearing, as well as the gloves that were stuffed into the raincoat pocket, and there was also a towel we found in Mr. Kurita's room. If I recall, those gloves belong to Mr. Kurita. Yeah, I noticed none of the... Oh wait, no, never mind, they're all there. As well as the raincoat, those were Mr. Kurita's too. Kurita, did you... No, Miss Akane, it wasn't... Before we jump to conclusions and point fingers at each other, wait until the end of my deductions, if you please. As Arimura stated, the killer would have the victim's blood on them. However, we only found blood on those items we've mentioned earlier. Inspector Harima, Arimura, and myself searched high and low to find any trace the killer would left behind to their bloody clothing. However, we all came up empty. This leads me to think the killer used a certain trick to prevent the blood from catching on them. What do you mean? The killer used something at the very site of the crime to prevent blood splatter from getting on them. It was... Put the cursor on the item. The killer used to prevent blooding the clothes, and press confirm. Okay. See, it does move around like it's totally a character. Oh, but none of these are walls. That's so cool. Look at that. Attention to detail like no other game. No, I'm kidding. The hell is this? Well, I'm gonna say the raincoat. Or, I mean, you know, his throat was slit, so they could have gone behind him, slit his throat, and in doing so incapacitated him pretty much, and then put their arm around him and stabbed him from behind into his chest. I'm saying that's the most likely thing. Or his corpse, the corpse of the raincoat. Indeed, the killer used the raincoat the victim was wearing to prevent the blood from getting on them. What? Then you're saying that before Mr. Natsume was wearing the raincoat, the killer wore it first? You're exactly right. That is how Mr. Natsume ended up wearing the raincoat inside out. This reason was why the only outside of the raincoat was covered in blood, but not the inside. The killer also used this to prevent the victim's blood from spilling even more than it did, and of course served to protect themselves from blood splatters. This makes sense. That makes sense. But why did the killer put the raincoat on Mr. Natsume in the first place? Simple. It was in order not to make a mess of the room. The room? I'm confused here. Mr. Natsume's room was absolutely covered in blood. I can't fathom why it was so important for the killer to put the raincoat on Mr. Natsume after the murder. Recall the scene of the crime, Dr. Harima. There was certainly a lot of blood on the books of the bookshelf and on the carpet in Mr. Natsume's room. However, it was absent from the floor. There wasn't a drop of blood to be seen. Didn't that strike you as unnatural? So the killer wiped all the blood off the floor, then to make sure it didn't get dirty again, dressed up the victim in the raincoat afterward. Now, did that make sense for everyone? Not exactly, Nina. The killer still left the books and carpet covered in blood. Why would they only care about the blood on the floor? Let's think outside the box here. Why would you get blood... when you get blood on something, what type of materials can't be easily cleaned? That would be fabrics made out of cloth and linen, like papers and... Ah, I get it now. The killer didn't clean up the books and the carpet because it couldn't once blood got on them. Good job, Arimura. But isn't that more strange? Why would the killer only bother cleaning up the floor when there were other blood spatters that would, incriminate them anyway? Because it was most vital the killer wipe up that blood to begin with. It would be incriminating evidence that would tie the killer to the crime without fail, so they would have to do everything in their power to wipe it up. Evidence that would tie them to the crime? I don't understand the significance at all. How does the blood on my older brother's room end up exposing the killer, Mr. Investigator? Not quite, Azusa. It wasn't the blood in your older brother's room that the killer cleaned up. I'm sorry, but what are you babbling about? All I'm hearing is a bunch of redundant nonsense. You make less sense with every word you speak, Detective. Then let me explain in full detail. The entire trick behind the case is... Killer changed the body. Killer altered the bloodstains. Switched the crime scene. Manipulated the time of death. I don't know. Well, let's see. I am still confused about why. Okay, so the killer changed the body. That wouldn't make sense. Why would there still be... Why would they clean up blood that is altered the bloodstains? Yeah, but for what purpose? Switch the crime scene. That would be a good idea, but I don't think it would make a lot of sense. Manipulate it. I'm gonna say altered the bloodstains. Altered the bloodstains? Really now? How does that make any sense? The only thing you've done is convince me that you don't even know what you're talking about. Yeah, let's think this through again. Alright. Okay. You know, Detective Inaba is not the best detective. It's just his power to reload games allows him to, win every time. Switch the crime scene. You mean that Mr. Natsume's room is not the original crime scene? That is correct. Then where was the murder originally committed at? In the killer's room. In their own room? The killer called Mr. Natsume over to their own room and then killed him there. However, they were well aware that if anyone were to discover the victim's body in their room, they would become the top suspect. That's why the killer switched the crime scene to Mr. Natsume's room, so it would seem like the murder occurred there instead. Then the killer wiped up all the blood that was in their own room. Precisely, Dr. Harima. And any materials that had blood on it couldn't... and they just switched it there. Okay, that makes sense. I see now. So the floor of Natsume's room didn't have to be wiped from it because it never had blood on it to begin with. That's correct, Azusa. Who did it, Mr. Inaba? Who is the killer? The person who... Jeez, that was fast. Who killed in their own room is... the music stopped too. Okay, Nadeshiko. Okay. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense because I feel like a mother wouldn't stab their own son to death just because he was rude to her, and I don't know. I really don't think that she would have done it. Tsubaki. Yeah, he really disliked him, but I feel like that there's no motive enough for him to kill him. So, Azusa. That's a maybe, because he's smart enough to switch shit out like that, and also it's kind of a least suspected thing. So, okay, even if I do get it right, eventually once I get it right, but I will definitely do that, because I want to see people's reactions. Sakura, no, because she was under police protection, so there's no way that she could have done that without people seeing. Akane Sakaki. Akane. Who is that? That was the middle sister. Yeah. I mean, she seems like an idiot anyway. That doesn't make sense. Shun. None of these make sense. Like, the only one that makes any bit of sense. Teremitsu Kurita. Kurita? Who the hell is Kurita? Oh, that was the gardener, right. I just never learned his first name. Yuki Shimizu. Yeah, I'm thinking it's either her or Azusa. I don't want to be wrong about this, but at the same time, it's like I have plenty of... Alright, well, I really feel like there's not enough evidence to accuse people yet, Okay, so but why, though? I mean, I can see why he would kill his father for the sake of... For the abuse. That makes sense. But not so much... But he is a smart guy, I'm gonna do it. Azusa killed Natsume in his own room? No, something feels off. Damn it, I need to think this through once more. Oh, I just guess not. Yuki. Yeah. Okay. Nadeshiko. Tsubaki. Azusa. Sakura. Akane. Aoi. Shun Ishihara, you were the one who killed Mr. Natsume in your own quarters. Huh? Mr. Ishihara is Mr. Natsume's killer? No, it can't be. Just a moment, Mr. Inaba. Mr. Ishihara has an alibi. He was with me at the time of the murder. Remind me again where the two of you met? We met in front of Mr. Ishihara's room, sir. Exactly. As I said, the crime was being done in the killer's, Mr. Ishihara's room during that time. Then while I was speaking to Mr. Ishihara in his room, Mr. Natsume was... Yes, Mr. Natsume was on the floor, bleeding to death. You know, I take it... I think... Inaba is a good detective, it's just the player's incompetence. You see, like, I never would have... I mean, you know, he was obviously... A lot of stuff pointed to him, but it's... like I said, I feel like there should have been more evidence before we started accusing people. I feel like there was a lot more last time, like in the first game. Yes, Mr. Natsume was on the floor, bleeding to death. Do you have any evidence that points to me being the killer, sir? I do. Let me hear it. The evidence that directly points to oh god, that's right, we gotta explain it. Points to Mr. Ishihara being Natsume's killer is... Oh, yes, right, okay. The guitar! No, I'm kidding. Oh. Can I? Okay. The blood-soaked books on Mr. Natsume's bookshelf are the decisive pieces... Are the decisive piece of... You mean pieces? Or is the decisive piece of evidence that point to Mr. Ishihara being his killer? Why the books? Yes, as I said earlier, Mr. Ishihara had switched the crime scene. Therefore, anything that had blood on it that couldn't be wiped off was swapped between Mr. Ishihara's room and Mr. Natsume's room. In short, even things that were Mr. Ishihara's own personal property needed to be swapped. Of course, then all those books that had blood stuck to them were originally from Mr. Ishihara's room, right? Indeed, Arimura. If you can recall, some of the titles that were of Mr. Ishihara's books were The Fundamentals of Cooking, Worry-Free Living, and Healthy Habits, Healthy Life. Yes, those are certainly mine, sir. Hold on, those books are the ones that I gifted to every member of my household, domestic helpers included. Mother is correct, I have those books too. Yeah, okay, so that explains why everybody had those books. I even gave those books to Natsume, despite the fact he was never with the patience to read, bless his soul. They say they should still be sitting on his shelf. Yes, and everyone's books were accounted for. Even Mr. Ishihara's books were still there after the murder. The problem lies in the arrangement. The books in both Mr. Ishihara's and Mr. Natsume's rooms were changed around a bit. Okay, their books were rearranged. So what? People's bookshelves get rearranged all the time. Unless you're telling us you're so perfect that yours never changes. You're not wrong, Miss Akane. Ordinarily, people do not move around their books on the books on their bookshelves a bit in day-to-day life. I don't think I read that right at all. If that's the case, then how does this implicate me as the killer, sir? It's just one thing. I found something peculiar in Mr. Natsume's bookshelf that shouldn't be there in the first place. Huh? It was a diary titled Kyo's Tips to Housekeeping. When you were swapping the contents between the two rooms, you made an error and overlooked this diary amidst the belongings. This diary is yours, correct? Shun? I will admit this diary belongs to me, sir. However, I have absolutely no motive for killing Mr. Natsume. So it wasn't all for Miss Sakura's sake? Huh? Me? Are you gonna tell me I'm wrong? You truly are a great detective, sir. What do you mean? I demand an explanation. I agree. I believe a detailed explanation is in order. It all started on the night of the 10th, the first day Arimura, Dr. Harima, and I came to this residence. It was that evening that Miss Shimizu witnessed Mr. Ishihara entering Mr. Natsume's room. Wow, she was right. Yes, that's right. But for the wrong reasons, I suppose, but... it was then that Mr. Natsume wanted to discuss a certain matter with him. And what would that be? Is this guy wearing like a cloak or something? Or is it just like a really wide, like, coat? Mr. Natsume was trying to find any underhanded method possible to receive the inheritance for himself, Mr. Tsubaki. Shortly into the conversation, he proposed I kill Miss Sakura. I made a counter-proposal to send a death threat to her instead. Then you're saying the death threat I received was... Yes, it was all my doing, Miss Sakura. I am truly sorry to put you through such distress. And that is all I have to say about my detailed explanation. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Mr. Ishihara, I can only form a conjecture from here, but I must say, was that truly the last time you spoke with Mr. Natsume? Did it really end with you delivering a death threat to Miss Sakura? It's just as you're thinking, Mr. Inaba. Mr. Natsume was not satisfied with simply sending a death threat. His mind was set. He could only be satiated once Mrs. Sakura was killed in cold blood. Man, I knew some lame-ass death threat wouldn't work. What's the fucking point if Sakura won't give up the family inheritance? But going back to plan A, we gotta kill her ASAP. But Mr. Natsume, to go so far as to murder someone, nevertheless your younger sisters, chill out, I got this all under control. As long as you've got the money, you can make anything look like an accident in a snap, right? And Ishihara, if you snitch on me, I'll kill you too. Got it? Are you serious, sir? Look at my face, I'm dead serious. I'm thinking about building my own company where we do things my way, and for that I need money. A lot of money. Taking my shitty old man's filthy money makes me want to puke, but I need it to make my dream come true. I gotta do it for my special lady. I have to do it for her sake. I need to be able to take care of her. I see. So that's how it is. Huh? You got something to say? Mr. Natsume? What? I will kill Miss Sakura for you. But not really. And that is what happened in our second meeting. Natsume, that's when I knew in my heart I had no choice but to kill Mr. Natsume. Okay, well this is a bit different. Instead of some psychopath who likes killing people and watching the murder mystery play out to write as motive for his books, as like a inspiration for books, to basically just write out everything that happens, then, you know, which was far more interesting in my opinion. But this is interesting too. Like, he did kill him, yeah, but it was for good reasons, in my opinion, and in others, I hope. But that still doesn't tell of what the fuck is up with, you know. Oh shit, sorry. What's up with their father? Why? Tell me why. It's because Mr. Ishihara, too, had a special someone he needed to protect. So that at least solves one lingering question on my mind. The question being, why did Mr. Natsume not run away upon seeing a strange figure dressed in a raincoat and gloves wielding a kitchen knife indoors? No matter how long you live under the same roof, if you were to suddenly see an acquaintance dressed like that, there would be alarms going off in your head. But now it all comes together. On the surface, it appeared you were complicit in his crime, but you were waiting for the moment to strike and kill him. Precisely as you said, sir. I told Mr. Natsume that his plan was ready for action. Therefore, I requested he come by my quarters late that night to lay out the plans for me one last time. Oh, I see. It's a quote. So lay out the apostrophe for... I can't believe I just said that. Lay out the plans for me one last time. Whoa, I can't believe you're really doing this. Yes, I plan to stab Miss Sakura in her sleep with a knife that doesn't look anything like the knife that was at the... That looks like a part of some bone shears. And what about the cop? Don't worry, I'll have taken care of it, sir. Okay, then what's with the get-up? It's so no blood splatters will get on me. Interesting. That's some real smart thinking, Ishihara. It's nothing, sir. What's up? Don't tell me you're getting cold feet already. This will be the last time I ask you this, Mr. Natsume. Do you still intend to go through with this? Yeah, I can't stop now, not when I'm this close. Is that so? What do you... Ugh. I'm sorry to hear that, sir. And a moment later, Sasimoto came by. I quickly took off the raincoat and gloves and went to talk to her in the hallway. That's probably why he got all pissy. After sending Miss Sasimoto off, he began to work on switching the crime scene. Yes, sir. I also realized at the time I could use Sasimoto stopping by my quarters as an alibi for the early morning of the 12th. You then put Mr. Natsume's body into the raincoat and turned it inside out, and you transported him with a carpet so it wouldn't dirty the halls. After that, any materials that had blood on them that could be washed were cleaned, and anything that couldn't was swapped between your rooms. Exactly as you said, sir. I made every effort to ensure everything was properly swapped. However, the diary completely slipped my notice. With that, we conclude the case of Mr. Natsume's murder. Mr. Inaba, I do have one question. What's that? Yesterday, the whole incident with the teacup, was that Mr. Ishihara as well? No, that wasn't me, ma'am. Huh? And who did it? Natsume, who else? Natsume, who else? He was the one who wanted to kill Sakura. No, the criminal wasn't Mr. Natsume in this case. Huh? The person who tampered with Miss Sakura's teacup was... Why do I have to pick... I feel like this isn't really a whole lot of... Oh, whatever. I feel like the point in making choices, ooh, destroyed. I knew that he had some part in it, but I feel like that, with the last game, it made wrong choices annoying enough that you wanted to avoid them. Because in the last game, if you got something wrong and started explaining things in some way that made no sense to anybody, people would start to blame you, which I liked. I mean, I thought that was cool, but in this one, he's just like, that wouldn't make sense. Choose a different option. Akane Sakaki, you were the... Oh, wait, that's Akane, not... I can't remember his name. A something. Azusu? I think that's what it is. What? Why would you accuse me of all people? Hold on a minute. Would someone mind filling me in on what we're currently talking about here? I'm just as lost as you are, Tsubaki. Sounds like someone amongst us tried to tamper with Sakura's teacup. This is the first I've heard of it. You're correct, Azusa. The majority of you are not aware of this incident. I want everyone to recall last night's dinner. Mr. Ishihara told everyone that a dish was broken, so all the tableware needed to be replaced. The truth of the matter was that someone among us attempted to poison Miss Sakura's teacup with methanol alcohol, but they dropped the teacup by mistake. The only ones who knew of this were myself, Arimura, Dr. Harima, Mr. Ishihara, and Miss Sasamoto. Ergo, all Arimura said earlier was the whole incident with the teacup. Then how did you know about the nature of the crime? And the target was Miss Sakura? Mind telling me how you gained this knowledge, Miss Akane? That's because I remember during dinner you instantly knew it was a teacup that was broken and even dropped Miss Sakura's name in the conversation. It's not... Ooh. Dang, I didn't even notice that. Thankfully I haven't broken anything recently, Akane. When it comes to broken dishes, anyone would normally think of the housekeeper, Miss Sasamoto. However, your first instinct was Miss Sakura. Was it because you knew beforehand that Miss Sakura's teacup was the dish that was broken? Well, Miss Akane? Yeah, it was me. Yeah, that's pretty fucked. Akane, why? It's because I'm the only one who can succeed Dad's business. I want the inheritance just as badly as anyone else here. In order to fulfill Dad's expectations, I first need to prove my worth to him as a future heir. So I studied and studied and studied. Even after getting accepted into a great university, I still studied from dusk to dawn and worked my ass off. But Dad never acknowledged me in the slightest. That's why I tried my damnedest to be even better than him. All I wanted was to hear him for once say, "I never expected such grand things from you, my daughter. You have surpassed even me." But now that can never happen. Before I could show him the fruits of my labor, he died. So Akane, I wanted the inheritance, sure, but when that detective told us that one of us murdered my dad, I kept thinking it over in my head about how Sakura might have murdered him just to secure his inheritance all for herself. You thought it would be best if your sister had a taste of her own medicine, didn't you, Miss Akane? Yeah, but I once poured the contents of the vial of methanol alcohol into my sister's teacup. I got really scared. But, god damn it. Killing someone isn't courageous, Miss Akane. Maybe you're right. It really isn't. Then the incident with the teacup had nothing to do with Mr. Natsume's case. The two cases are not related at all. Mr. Inaba, I want to thank you for finally uncovering who murdered my Natsume, but what about my beloved husband? Who murdered him? Of course, ma'am. Now allow me to solve the mystery surrounding Mr. Sakaki's murder. First, I will review what Dr. Harima and I both have gathered from our first victim, Rindo Sakaki, from the beginning to what we know now. Mr. Sakaki's cause of death was strangulation by a rope. The time of death was estimated to be at 11 p.m. on the 9th, 3 days ago. His body was found hanging from the ceiling. It would initially appear to anyone who discovered his body that Mr. Sakaki committed suicide. However, when I examined his body, I noticed that the bruising on Mr. Sakaki's neck was inconsistent with ones I've seen with suicides. Indeed, the only conclusion left was that Mr. Sakaki did not commit a suicide, but he was murdered. This was all confirmed later when he received an autopsy report. Additionally, the autopsy found that Mr. Sakaki had traces of sleep medication in his system, so the killer rendered him unconscious and then strangled him. Wouldn't strangling the victim and staging the crime scene take considerable upper body strength? I'm not so sure if a woman or a child would be capable of that. Shouldn't this narrow down our suspect pool? That is the reason why the killer used sleeping pills to begin with. Then it would be possible for anyone to strangle an adult male without assistance. Now, as for staging the crime scene and hanging the victim's body, have you considered the possibility the killer might have an accomplice working with him? An accomplice? Remember the will we found in Mr. Sakaki's room? I'm almost certain it was not written by the descendant. See, I knew it. That will was forged. That's not true. I know my husband's handwriting. Of course, you'd think so, Mrs. Sakaki. After all, the amanuensis has not only been writing in place of your husband for nearly 3 years, but they've also perfectly replicated his handwriting. An amanuensis? What do you mean? Allow me to explain. Wasn't your husband involved in a car accident with a drunk driver 3 years ago? Yes, that is correct. The accident regrettably left Mr. Sakaki with radial nerve palsy, wishing is a condition that leaves the afflicted unable to use their hands. I never knew. Since he was incapable of using his hands, there can be no question that Mr. Sakaki had used his amanuensis to become his subtle writer for the past 3 years. I see. So Dad was eating exclusively in his room due to the fact that he couldn't use his hands. It all makes sense now. Father would never allow any of us to see such disgrace. Yes, such disgrace. What a disgrace it is for you to have a totally random accident happen. Then who was the agent writing on Mr. Sakaki's behalf? The person who was Mr. Sakaki's amanuensis is... Let's see if I can first try this shit. I think it's Sakura. Okay. Nadeshiko Tsubaki Azusa Tsubaki. Nope, that's not what I meant. Okay. Okay. Azusa? No. Sakura? No. Akane? No. Aoi? No. Shun? God, again? You are Mr. Sakaki's amanuensis. You are correct. I am the amanuensis who has been writing on Master Rindo's behalf for the last 3 years. But how did you know, sir? I knew from the very moment you told me yourself that you were responsible for Mr. Sakaki's meals during breakfast yesterday. When Sasamoto and I would bring his meals, the master would tell me what he liked done throughout the day, as well as instruct me on tasks he liked accomplished. Okay. After the two of you delivered his meals, Miss Sasamoto would promptly leave his room. However, you remained behind with Mr. Sakaki. As we have heard from Mr. Tsubaki earlier, Mr. Sakaki would never allow anyone in his family to see him in this disgraceful state. Undoubtedly, this would apply to the domestic helpers as well, so Mr. Sakaki wouldn't have his butler linger any longer than he had to. So there must be a reason why you had to stay instead of leaving with us, leaving with Miss Sasamoto. And there can only be one reason. Mr. Ishihara knew of Mr. Sakaki's condition and acted as his amanuensis. So, Mr. Ishihara knew all about Mr. Sakaki's condition and became his hands of pure necessity. Does that sound about right, Mr. Ishihara? Yes, ma'am. Right after the car accident, the master ordered me to write on behalf of his amanuensis, but he wasn't happy with just that alone. He wanted the whole world to not know. Therefore, he instructed me on how to replicate his penmanship so that no one would be the wiser. And that brings us to how you drafted a holographic will in his name so flawlessly, so that no one would doubt its validity. Then why did Mr. Ishihara choose Sakura to be the beneficiary? It was the same motive as when he killed your older brother, Mr. Tsubaki. Mr. Ishihara gave Miss Sakura the inheritance in order to protect her. He was protecting me? In truth, the master had zero inclination to give anyone the Sakaki family inheritance. This also extended his domestic help to his domestic helpers. His sole consideration was to pass on his inheritance to a worthy successor outside the family. It can't be. I urged the master many times over to reconsider his decision, but he wouldn't listen to me. Naturally, if you feared what would happen to Miss Sakura if she were to not receive the inheritance. Miss Sakura has lived an extremely sheltered life as the esteemed daughter of a wealthy family. So you were worried, so you were worried about what would happen to her if she were to be kicked out of the house and forced to live a normal life at this point. It's plainly obvious that what would happen. She would end up falling on tough times or be taken advantage of by the very world she was protected from. So in order to ensure Miss Sakura will never have to go through such a hardship, Mr. Ishihara made sure she will become the heir to the inheritance. You are correct, sir. Shun. That's the entire reason why you murdered my father, Ishihara? That is correct. Mr. Ishihara is responsible for the murders of Mr. Natsume and Mr. Sakaki. What? I confess. What he says is the truth. Why? I thought you only killed for the sake of my sister. Why did you have to kill our father? I'm sorry, Miss Sakura. Your life is so much more important than my own. All I do is for you. My sincerest wish is for you to live on happily. But I do have to make one thing clear. The real reason behind me murdering Master Rindo is not for Miss Sakura's sake in the end. What? Your true reason for killing is revenge, isn't it? Revenge? Mr. Inaba, how on earth are you aware of that? Mr. Ishihara, you are actually the product of the affair Mr. Sakaki had with the former housekeeper Kyo Aoba. It can't be. And that would mean the diary Kyo's tips to housekeeping was written by your mother. Then the K in K Aoba stands for Kyo? Yes, it's true. I am the son of the housekeeper who worked here 30 years ago. My real name is Shun Aoba. And his name tag doesn't change. It was 24 years ago. My mother had sent a letter about Master Rindo's affair to the Sakaki family a few days before. I still remember that dreadful night like it was yesterday. The smell of smoke had woken me up. My house was on fire, and no matter where I turned, I was met with a sea of flames. In a daze, I grabbed my little sister's hand and had managed to escape with my life from the flames. However, my mother was too late, and had died to the fire. I later learned that it was Master Rindo who had set my house on fire. He wanted to erase any evidence of his infidelity by killing us off. Master Rindo never had to worry about the law. He used his wealth and power to cover his involvement. So a distant relative of my mother gained custody of my sister and I. We were only 5 years old at the time. We had adopted their surname, Ishihara. My little sister went on to live a more simple life. She always insisted that the fire that day was nothing but an accident. But not I. I swore to exact the same revenge my mother had sought, and went on to become a butler within the Sakaki household. I see now. I didn't know, Mr. Ishihara. At long last, I got revenge for my mother. I have no regrets. Shun Ishihara, you are hereby under arrest for the murders of Rindo Sakaki and Natsume Sakaki. Mr. Ishihara, Sasamoto, Mr. Curator, I leave this house in your care. Mr. Ishihara, of course, Mr. Ishihara, you can trust us. Let's go. Shun, Miss Sakura, no matter what, please be happy. That's all I could ask for. Goodbye. After that, Mr. Ishihara was placed in isolation within his own quarters. The next day, the police were able to arrive with the cessation of the snowstorm. Mr. Ishihara led away by Inspector Harima into police custody, and thus the curtain to this case quietly fell. Thank you so much, truly, Mr. Inaba. Don't mention it, ma'am. All I did was bring things to their natural conclusion. May I make another request in the future if I have any need of your skills? Any time you like, ma'am. We'll eagerly await your request. You can rely on my assistance as well. Thank you for all your help. Take care of yourselves. Thanks, I guess. Yeah, so is she, like, just scot-free, now? I mean, I guess she did actually try. I mean, it looks like she was about to, but then she had second thoughts. I mean, I don't know. you're always free to stop on by. Yeah, like I feel people are gonna judge her like crazy now. You know, that she would kill her sibling for their money. Next time, I'll have a bouquet of flowers prepared for you all. Hasta la vista. Yeah, you guys seem suspiciously joyous. Not you, but you never are. See you, Inaba. Yeah, and you are still suspicious as hell, in my opinion. Likewise, see you all. Normal and lost respect. Deduction skills. D. Yeah, well. Oopsie daisy. Did you not do so well in the investigation, Mr. Inaba? It'd be best if you tried again, but make more a thorough investigation this time, sir. Okay, Huh. Well, that was the normal end. I don't want to go through all that again. Okay, give me 1 sec. Because I've already beat the game, and I have no intention of playing it a second time. Not to say in any way that it was a bad game. It was very, very, very good. And it's taking forever to load. Okay, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try... Here, number 2. Suika bar. I forgot about that. Okay, so I'll walk through for the next ending. If there's anything specific I have to do, then I think I'll probably not go through that ending. But yeah, I mean, I guess I will, while I wait for this to load, I guess I'll just sort of do a rundown or whatever on what I thought of this. So, it was, oh my gosh, it just will not load. What the heck? Oh, wait, there it goes. Well, there we go. Okay, true end. Go outside and look at the snowman we made. Oh, I did that. Speak to Shigure twice to get dialogue and ask her about Tsubaki. I thought I did that. Examine Shun's closet and find the necklace. Are you kidding? That's ridiculous. Well, okay. I wonder if the true end is really any different than, like, would it have a different outcome? Well, let me think about the first game. No, I mean, not really. Just more information on it, I guess, is all that it would give on, like, motives. But I feel like we did a pretty good job on that. So, yeah. But anyways, that was the Mystery Files of Detective Inaba number 2. I don't know how many episodes are in this series, but I really hope there's more. But I very, very, very much enjoyed that, just like the last one. I don't think this one was as good as the last one, but I don't think it was a bad sequel at all. It wasn't, I don't think it was quite as long either. But, yeah. So, yeah. And, as usual, I really like, you know, the writing for all the characters and how it's sort of set up kind of like a play or something. It really seems like that, you know, like very, very solely surrounded around the fact that it is a, like a, you know, a murder mystery. But it's pretty good. And I like the little ranking at the end, the ranking system. That was cool too. So, yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. So, Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a like and subscribe to join the Chorus Rebellion. If you have any suggestions for games for me to play or ways to make my commentating more enjoyable, don't hesitate to leave a comment. That's about it. See ya.